We are Chris Lee and Blake Lovell of Southeastern 14 here to preview Alabama's 2023 basketball season. Our channel is always presented by Steaks. Blake, it has been an interesting time in the state of Alabama with two programs really emerging as, I don't know if dominant powers would be the word, but certainly nationally relevant. Auburn took the driver's seat in the state last year. Alabama had won the league the year before. We've talked about Auburn already. The Crimson Tide, though, seeming to me, looking at the roster, seeing what Alabama did in recruiting and in the transfer portal, very much primed to potentially make a run at another SEC title under Coach Nate Oats.
Yeah, coming off of I think a disappointing season last year, where things just did not come together the way that you probably expected them to after that regular season title the year before, and but now you're replacing a lot of guys, but you're replacing a lot of guys with a lot of talent, and I think it's in some situations it's going to be a case of maybe Alabama gets a bit better just in terms of having perhaps a better fit in a certain spot than they did, a year ago. And I think that's something that's kind of fun to think about with this roster and the way it's made up. Is that every roster that Nate Oats has had has certainly been different, but the one thing in common is, as always, a lot of guys that can handle the ball, a lot of guys can score, a lot of guys can shoot the three. And I think it's going to be kind of interesting to see, how does this team compare to some of the other teams he's had? Like I said, certainly one that won a regular season title a couple years ago. The one last season that just, for whatever reason, could never find that consistency. I'm sure there's a lot of reasons for that, but there just was not that consistency there. Can they get back to being consistent, even with some young players? They're going to play a lot of minutes. That's another question you can have for this team. But no doubt, in terms of where the state of the program is at, I think still in very good hands with Nate Oats.
Well, there's a lot of interesting dynamics on this team. There's some interesting returnees, including Namori Burnett, who never played last year after transferring from Texas Tech as I think a very high four-star recruit out of high school. But I think it all starts at the point guard position where Alabama's got returnee Jahvon Quinerly, who averaged 13.8 points, 4.2 assists a year ago. It's got Mark Sears from Ohio, who is one of the better transfers in the country in the portal. And then Jaden Bradley, a five-star recruit. Alabama does not lack for guys who can handle the ball, Blake.
Yeah, and it's good to have that because, of course, Quinterly won't be back for a while. So, I mean, it's going to be a situation where until you get him back, the good news is that you do have Sears. You've got, like you said, you've got Bradley. You've got all these guys. I mean, Brandon Miller could probably do those things too, given what he's capable of. So, probably be nice to see a 6'9" guy with a almost 7-foot wingspan bringing the ball down the floor perhaps. But yeah, it's just guards. We know that's going to be the driving force of a Nate Oats team, and I think you look at this team and clearly the makeup that you have here, bringing in someone like Sears, who is an accomplished player. Almost average they average 20 points a game, basically last season, and shot almost 41% from three. So you've got that as someone who can handle the ball. That's a nice situation to be in. You've got Burnett, like you said, finally ready to play at Alabama. It was a long road to get there because I think, initially in high school, a lot of people thought maybe choose Alabama, chooses Texas Tech, goes there, finally gets back to Alabama, but then gets injured. So now he gets a chance to get out there and put on, the uniform during a regular season game. And so that will be, I think, give them a big boost. Obviously, another guy who can score, another guy also with a lot of length. This team's got some length to it in terms
Yeah.
of, just big guards that have good wingspans. And of course, that's not even talking about the front court. So I think, yeah, Sears, Burnett, obviously, when Quinterly comes back, he's a proven scorer. Could he when is he back? I know everybody will kind of talk about that. Maybe it's SEC play. Who knows? But still, they're going to get him back eventually, and that just gives him another boost. Then Bradley as well. Someone else that's kind of a pass first point guard that I think is, probably what they need too on a team that has a lot of guys who can shoot the ball and probably want to shoot the ball. It's good to have a guy like that too. So
Is Sears the guy that probably ends up leading them in minutes? I mean, I'm looking at Blue Ribbon's starting lineup projections. They've got Sears at the point, Dominick Welch at the 2, Namori Burnett on the other wing, and then Brandon Miller and Charles Bediako in the front court. Obviously, it's not going to be Quinerly because of the knee injury. And again, they've got a 5-star point guard recruit there too, and Bradley, who I think will vie for time. But I would presume Sears is probably the main guy worth watching here.
I mean, Welch has played about 673,242 minutes in college, it seems like. So I don't think he's going to quite play that many that he did at St. Bonaventure because, my goodness, that guy played a lot of minutes there. But yeah, I mean, look, Sears is, I just think with what he gives you and what he's able to bring to the table, I mean, he is going to be someone that I think that, like I said, he's going to be the primary ball handler, depending on when Quinerly gets back. But it just, how does he adapt to that role? But I just think his scoring ability, it's going to be hard to keep him off the floor. And I think, again, we know how valuable having a guard who can handle the ball and play that point guard position is. And we know how valuable it is in Nate Oats' system. And something else, Oats talked about, I know in the Blue Ribbon story, was just the idea of playing multiple points guards together. We're not just talking about two, we're talking about more than two. And I think that's where having Sears out there, just with the scoring ability, with the ability to shoot the ball from three, yeah, I mean he's gonna play a lot of minutes. And I think that's what's fun to think about too with this team is the combinations you could have out there, whether it's Sears, Burnett, Welch, Sears, Quinerly, Bradley. There's just so many different guys you can play together, and I think that's always entertaining to me with these Nate Oats teams at Alabama is the aspect of, all right, all these different guys kind of playing together in different rotations and what that looks like. I think you've just got so many different possibilities. But yeah, I mean, Sears is, I would expect, is the guy that sort of leads the way in terms of right off the bat. But like we said, too, I mean, we're talking about Brandon Miller as well, who's a guy that, could be an SEC player of the year candidate if everything comes together in Alabama, has a shot to win a league title or something. But I think Sears, just given his proven experience, proven production and what he did at Ohio, I think that he's going to certainly have a chance to be their guy right off the bat.
Man, you weren't kidding about Welch's minutes. I looked that up as you were talking. 37 and a half minutes a game last year at St. Bonaventure. Here's an interesting dynamic. Welch averaged 12.3 points, 6.0 rebounds. Sears averaged 19.6 points, 6.0 rebounds. So two guards who grabbed a ton of boards. I don't know what their role will be in this team, but that might be the top rebounding backcourt in the country for whatever that's worth. Man, if you are playing college fantasy basketball, Mark Sears might be your first round pick. I mean, this kid averaged, again, 19.6, 6.0, 4.1 assists a game, 1.7 steals a game, almost 36 minutes, shot 44% from the field, 41 from three, and 88% from the line, Blake. That's phenomenal.
Well, let's keep in mind too. I think it's always, as we always say,
And it was in the MAC, but anyway.
Well, but that's exactly what I was going to say. Is we always have that discussion of a player transferring up, but let's keep this in mind. Ohio's been a pretty good program,
Yes.
and Jeff Bowles has done a good job there. I mean, I'm looking at their record. I was trying to remember what it was, but that's a 25 win team last year. What was it? I mean, they struggled a little bit down the stretch, but they won 25 games last year. The year before, that's the team that gets to the NCAA tournament, beats Virginia, and loses to Creighton in the second round. So like he's been there in terms of, especially like last year. You kind of look at what he was able to do in his numbers. This is a guy who's played valuable minutes, and I think it's one where go back to his first season there, played good minutes, but last year, I mean, you go up down the line. I was looking at something earlier. I mean, there were there was, I'd say, probably at least half the games he played in, he's playing 35 plus minutes, 36 plus minutes for that Ohio team. So, I think there's something to that, playing for not just any mid-major team, but playing for a pretty quality team and producing, playing the amount of minutes that he did. So yeah, I mean, there has to be a lot of excitement for Mark Sears, who was easily one of the best transfers I think out there, just in terms of what he's going to bring to the table. So yeah, I think that there's a lot of confidence in what he's going to be able to do there at Alabama.
Okay, what do you make of Namori Burnett? Because Burnett was, I think, I don't know, a top 40 recruit out of high school, maybe a little higher than that. I'm looking now, 34 in one place, I think. But and it look at Texas Tech, you're going to defend, and we know he can do that. But the shooting percentages, and look, this is 2 years ago. 28% from the field, 17% from three. Did hit 89% from the line. Did average 28 minutes a game, so he did something to get on the floor a lot. What do we make of him and his role?
I think that he could be we always use this term, and like sometimes people think it's like a derogatory term, but it's like I think he could be the glue guy, like the guy that is just kind of there, and everything kind of builds around just everything that he can do, if that makes sense. Like it's just, I think he's a very, we always use the word versatile, but I think in this case, it's pretty obvious in terms of like, this is a guy who, what is he? What's his height? He's six.
He
Um,
is listed at 6'4", 190.
but I think his wingspan is what, like 6'9", 6'10", something like that. And so I think we've seen his ability to obviously score. But I think the defending, the rebounding, all those kind of things. I just feel like he's someone that, again, this could be a deep rotation. But I think if you're Nate Oats and you're looking out there, I just get a sense that he will be one that will be hard to take off the floor. Coming back from an injury, finally sort of getting ready to prove himself. I think in this spot, he can score, he can do all these different things. So and that's what's fun. Again, I mean, I keep saying this, but it's like they could realistically, if you go Sears, Welch, Burnett, Quinerly, Bradley. I mean, think about all the options available to you just in those five guys. And like I said, we haven't even got to Brandon Miller yet. Um, like that's a good good thing to have. You look, I don't know if they're going to play all five at the same time, but it is kind of interesting to look at kind of how Burnett's going to fit into this equation. But I see him as someone that, because of all the little things he can do outside of just score, I feel like he's someone they need to have on the floor a lot. And I wouldn't be surprised if he's another one of those guys that minutes wise, um, could be one of their leaders in minutes if everything kind of comes together the way we think it can.
Well, before we get to their true front court guys, and I guess it depends on, you could consider this guy either front court or back court. I think the roster lists him as a guard. I forgot Darius Miles averaged almost 6 points a game, played 17 a game for them a minute ago. Didn't shoot the ball particularly well except from the line. What's his role on this team?
I mean, I think it's find as many minutes as you can, probably, because like I just mentioned, I mean, you think about all the guys that are there that I think are going to be. Sears is going to play, Welch is going to play, Burnett's going to play, Quinterly's going to play when he gets back, Bradley's going to play. Um, I mean, I think, for defensive reasons, I think Miles is a good guy to have out there. Look, I mean, we talk about Nate Oats, right? Someone who absolutely tells it like it is. Again, going back to the Blue Ribbon story, I've got in my notes here. Um, the comment was exactly what it was. Nate Oats said he shoots too many bad shots. And we know that. Like, he's just going to come out and say that. He will tell you what he thinks. And so I think that's something that has to get better, for him and probably for a lot of guys, because that was something last year we talked about. It was shot selection at times. It was also just, I think, the consistency defensively. But I think Miles can help him there defensively. Another guy who can shoot the three. So I think it's just trying to find minutes, honestly, Chris, because there's so many guys that are on this in this backcourt that, like I said earlier, I think the distribution of minutes is going to be one of the more fascinating things with this team because um, I think those other 5 guys I mentioned, I don't know how you keep them out of the rotation in terms of playing 15, 20 plus minutes a game, just given what they're capable of. So where does Miles fit into that? I'm not exactly sure.
Okay, before we talk about the rest of the roster, a shout out to our sponsor, Steaks. A lot of big games coming up in the SEC every week in football. And we're doing this in the midst of football season to add some excitement. We at Southeastern 14 make some predictions in the Stakes app every week. That is STAKES. We want to see if you guys agree or disagree with our picks. So go to playwithstakes.com/14. Sign up with Stakes. Place your predictions, whether you're for us or against us on our picks. If you use the invite code Southeastern14 when you sign up, you'll get a double welcome bonus. Free to play, free to make predictions, always free. Never costs you anything. You can win NFTs. You can have fun. You can beat us and rub our noses in it. We really appreciate our sponsor, Stakes, and would appreciate you guys going there, signing up for that, and having some fun at it while you do. Okay, the front court. You mentioned Brandon Miller, who is from our backyard. We are in the Nashville area. Went to Cane Ridge High School here locally. You got Charles Bediako, who was, I don't remember if he was a 4 or a 5-star recruit, but he's back for his second year. He was right on that borderline. I guess he was a 4 now that I look at it. 2 bigs in the middle that you can do a lot with there.
Yeah, I mean, Bediako, obviously, you're just, traditional big center guy who is 7 foot, and you know what position he's playing. There's no question about that. In terms of what he can bring to the table, I think just having him in the paint to block shots and defend will be something that they'll need in a lot. I mean, we talked about the SEC. Think about all the teams we've already previewed, and we've said the size is something that really stands out. Even a team like Vanderbilt, right? Like we've talked about the size for a lot of different SEC teams. So having a 7-footer, that can block shots, can defend, and give you some points in the paint, that's still important to have, even in the era of the 3 ball and all this other stuff. So that'll be the role that Bediako plays. But like I mentioned as well, I mean, Miller's if everything comes together like he is, Alabama has a chance to win the league if they're up there. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if he's the guy we're talking about and saying, man, the skills are there for him to be a first team all SEC type guy. Will it all come together? Who knows? We always say that about freshmen. Even as talented as they are, sometimes there can be a little bit of an adjustment. But the fact is, he can play anywhere on the court. And like I said, I mean, that was something else Oates commented on was, could be the 3rd best point guard on the team with Quinerly still injured. So, think about that as a 6'9" guy, 5-star freshman, and just can handle the ball. They just can do a lot of different things well. And so, I mean, the size is there. I mean, whether it's Miller, whether it's Bediako, Clowney's on the bench at 6'10". There's a lot of guys like that you've still got to have. I mean, it is a team that we know is known for guard play, dominated offense just from their guards in terms of shooting threes, getting to the rim. That's exactly what they want to do. That's the formula. But you've still got to have these guys, like I said, that that have this big sort of size to them that can play in the SEC. And Miller is, I think he's going to be a stud. I think he's going to be really good, and it's going to be fun to kind of see him play off of all these other guys we've already mentioned in the backcourt, because I think that that's going to open up a lot of stuff for him too. So yeah, Miller's. I don't like to put the jinx on anybody, Chris, but I think he's a surefire first team all freshman without question. And then I think it's beyond that, how well Alabama plays and kind of what his role looks like from that point. Again, playing around everybody else and just having the athleticism, the scoring ability, and also I think helping them on defense. We always say having someone that can guard multiple positions. I think that's exactly what Miller's going to give you there.
Yeah, I am looking at some all SEC teams. Lindy's has got 2 Alabama players. It picks 3 teams. It's got Jahvon Quinerly on the second team. I'm presuming they just kind of forgot about the injury or didn't forecast enough for that. And then the other guy they got on the team on the third team is Miller. So that tells you something right there. I'm looking at Blue Ribbon's all SEC team. Our good buddy Chris Dortch only picks one team. He picks a first team, and 5 players, no Alabama players on that. But anyway, I'm a little surprised we're not seeing Sears on somebody's team, but that's a sidebar. We've already been there.
I mean, look, when you have as many, like I said, they're going to have so many guys producing. I think that's always the thing you think about too is, the
yeah,
how is it sort of evened out in terms of the numbers and the scoring and those kind of things? Because realistically, like I said, you've got Sears who can shoot the three. He could go off at any time and make a lot of threes. Welch, the same way. Welch is, I think, he was shot 37.4% from three last year, made 91 threes, has never shot less than 36.4% from 3-point range, um, you know, in his entire career. And like we said, that's a lot of minutes with the Bonnies. And then Burnett, as we know, another guy who can score. So that's what I think you have to factor in too is, this could be a pretty evenly, this scoring team in terms of like all the different
yeah.
guys who can score. And I don't think that's surprising with an Alabama team, but and I think if you're Nate Oats, you'd love to see that because that means that this entire group, Sears, Welch, Burnett, Miller, Bradley, I think is another candidate for that. Quinerly, all those guys. I mean, these are all guys who are capable of putting up a lot of points. I mean, even like I said, someone like Clowney, who, young guy, but I think he'll be a part of the rotation. So I think it's a lot of those different things. Yeah, this is kind of a team that, individual awards may be what they are, but you could have a lot of guys that just kind of, are putting up double digits at any time, and I think that's what you want.
My apologies if you mentioned Noah Gurley. Sometimes as you were talking, you were saying things that are
Well, I
jogging
didn't,
things in my mind.
and
Okay,
and
well, there you go.
and
And we
here's
thought he'd be a
why.
big deal a year ago.
Well, and that's the thing is, again, Nate Oats, not one who will hold back in terms of, telling it. And that was kind of the theme. And looking at, my notes here, looking at Blue Ribbon, those kind of things. Like it's just I think the shooting is something that we thought, again, when they brought in Noah Gurley, we looked at the numbers and said, all right, here's another guy who's going to probably be able to knock down shots from the perimeter on a very, solid basis. But that just didn't necessarily happen. And I think they're going to want him to, not just do that this season. He's going to have to kind of prove himself to score in a variety of ways and be able to knock down more of those shots, take better shots, because that was the theme too of Oates. It seemed like in the story that Chris Dortch did do was shot selection for a lot of different guys, and I think that's something with Gurley, but that's the thing too is like we shouldn't be shocked if he finds his way and becomes a mainstay because we know again coming from Furman what he was capable of. And now, maybe it's just a better fit, right? Like maybe this roster is a better fit for him than the roster last season. And I think you can never kind of discount those kind of things is maybe the guys you're playing around better fit for your game, can open up a little more for you to be a little more comfortable in what your role is. And again, I don't are expectations for him going to be as high as they were when we first heard Noah Gurley is transferring to Alabama? Probably not. Just because I think again last season there were some ups and downs, but he could absolutely still find his way into the rotation for sure.
Man, this is just a really stacked roster in terms of talent. I mean, I'm just looking at this. We haven't spent a lot of time on Rylan Griffen. He was the number 56 recruit in the country. Nick Pringles, a JUCO kid, 6'9", 220 from Dodge City Community College in Kansas that averaged about 9 and 9, shot 62% from the field. He'll help them underneath. I mean, this is a team that, to me, on paper in terms of talent, can withstand a couple of injuries potentially. And they're coming for some team. I mean, some teams get through the year relatively healthy, some teams don't. But I think that is a really nice backstop for the Crimson Tide as you look up and down that scholarship roster, and there's a lot of talent there. Somebody's going to get squeezed out of playing time, but that same person might find himself with an opportunity to earn minutes if you get an injury or two along the way.
Yeah, and I think that's a big storyline heading into the season is knowing that Quinterly's not going to be back right away, and we've kind of said that before in other spots is that's going to by necessity force guys like a Bradley who is a 5-star freshman still going to be he's going to play minutes even if Quinterly's there, but that's going to force him to do more things. That's going to force Sears and all those guys to play more minutes. And I think that can be a good thing. And like you said, maybe someone like Griffen who can shoot the ball comes in and finds a little bit of a role early on. And maybe it is Miles, who improves his shot selection and can help them on defense. So there are minutes to go around. And we know with how they play, you need more than just five. You got to have more than five guys out. I mean, it's just, you've got to have the luxury of you're getting up and down the floor. And I just think that defensive part of this is going to be important because that was something else we said, right? What was the difference last year for Alabama, Chris? The difference between the team that won the league and the team that was just so up and down. It was very easy. There were two things in particular. It was defense just was not there at times. They did not defend well enough, and they did not shoot the three well enough. They shot 30.9% from three last year. That's 303rd in the nation. Meanwhile, Ken Pom adjusted defensive efficiency when they won the SEC. They were third in the country last year, 92. So there's your big difference for Alabama. If they're going to get back up, have a chance to win a league title, they've got to shoot the ball better. As Nate Oats has said, they've got to take better shots. That may be part of it, but they've also got to defend better. And that's where I think some of these guys, having the depth that they have, we said a lot of guys can score, but there's going to be a lot of guys who are just going to be in there that have to defend too. I mean, they have to defend. They can't just score. Like that's a big part of it. But I think he's built a roster where you've got some guys who are very good scorers, but they also add that skill on the defensive side. And, again, I think that's where maybe some of those guys, you don't know exactly what their roles are. Just being able to help defensively would be a big part of that. And two, right? Something else, Chris. We know Alabama's going to play a tough schedule. They always do. And so that's something else to think about. If Quinerly's not back for a while, I'm looking at their schedule now. They got Liberty in there. They've got the Phil Knight thing where they start off with Michigan State, and I think they play Oregon or UConn in the game after that. Let's see who else they've got. They got Houston, who's a preseason top 5 team. They got Memphis. They go to Gonzaga. That's just what they do, right? Like we know this now. Like that's what Alabama does. They play a tough schedule. And so I think those are the kind of things you look at too here. They've got that 3-game stretch for a second season in a row. Houston, Memphis, the Zags. So, and add that to the Phil Knight thing, which is going to be a challenge too. So, yeah, it's a tough schedule. So I think that's why I like the way Alabama schedules, is because you are going to see some of these guys that right, like I said, they're going to be thrust into these roles, and they're going to have to, play their way through any sort of ups and downs, because I think it's going to be by necessity. Again, until Quinerly can get back, knowing that he's going to give them that big boost scoring wise, but this is that opportunity right off the bat for these other guys. Whether it is Miles kind of trying to get back into that mix, whether it's a Bradley, a Griffen, all those guys. I think it's going to be kind of fun to see how they carve out these roles before they head into SEC play.
Yeah, when you said the two things that were troublesome for them last year, I immediately thought defense, and I think I would have maybe phrased the other one a little differently, maybe shot selection, but either way, and that translates to scoring. It seems like that's how Nate Oats saw it, but I'm looking, Ken Pom has got them preseason 13th in offense and 34th in defense. Last year, they were, goodness gracious, 92nd in defense and 16th on offense, but 112 in effective field goal percentage and 271 in turnovers. Where they made it up somewhat was offensive rebounding. But yeah, nothing like the year before when they were, I would have thought they were better. They were 30 on offense, 3 on defense. I guess defense does win championships. And they weren't the greatest shooting team around that year. They were 90th in effective field goal percentage, but, they had Herb Jones to make up for a lot of deficiencies and good guard play and all kinds of stuff. But, yeah, you're right. They do – I respect the way they schedule. And I think that's what made last year so disappointing was they could beat the heavyweights, but then they turn around and they're the only team in the league that loses to Georgia. So you would hope that there's more consistency here with Alabama this year.
Well, yeah, I mean, they were easily the most frustrating team to to watch last season. Again, you may argue that differently if you're a Georgia fan, or someone else that had their ups and downs. But in terms of possibility, versus results, or potential versus results, that Alabama was easily the most frustrating team to watch because you knew what they were capable of. It was just that consistency was not there, and I think it did start. Like you talked about, even if I think that they shot 30.9% from three last year. And, we talked about turnover percentage. I mean, even bad shots, you probably chart, I'm sure some coaches chart that. Like you add a bad shot as a turnover, basically. Like that's essentially a
Hmm.
turnover. And if you kind of combine those together, there's no telling what that number would be if you charted those the entire season, which I would not doubt. Nate Oats, the mathematician, if he would have maybe charted that as well to kind of add in some of those turnovers. So, yeah, this is, I mean, let's call it what it is, right? Like this is basically a new team. Um, when you really think about it, this is basically an entirely different team that's going to be built so much different than that team was last year. Realistically, you're going to have not a new starting five because Betty Arco started some games last year, but Sears, Welch, Burnett, Miller, all newcomers. First guy off the bench could be Bradley, newcomer. Clowney's there, we said, but then you've got the returners like Gurley and Miles. What roles do they play? Yeah, so I think it's I always say when you have a new group like this, chemistry is important. That chemistry, just for whatever reason, was not there last year. Throughout the entire season. Will it be there with this team? I am optimistic because I think that when you look at sort of, I don't know, there's just something about I think the way this roster is constructed. I really like that trio of Sears, Welch, and Burnett right off the
Yeah.
bat, and then you combine that with Quinerly's return. And like I said, we're not undervaluing the freshmen either. I mean, they don't get 5 stars they don't hand those out easily. So for Miller and Bradley and those guys. Like I said, I think Clowney just at 6'10", he's going to have to be a part of the rotation in the front court just because of his size. All those guys are going to play minutes, and I think it's just is that chemistry there with this group. I think there's a nice blend here, and I'm very optimistic about what this team is capable of, and I think they can bounce back from that pretty inconsistent year last year.
The range of predictions on Alabama, and you can see those scrolling across our ticker, is interesting. On the low end, you've got Bart Torvik with Alabama at 39. Lindy's has got Alabama at 30. Of course, Torvik is a computer ranking. Lindy's is put together by humans. You got Ken Palm has got Alabama at 18. And you've got our buddy Chris Dortch at Blue Ribbon, who, full disclosure, we're both good friends with Chris. We've done a lot of work over there at Blue Ribbon. And so we're probably a little biased, but I think Blue Ribbon does as good a job of going in depth on everybody as anybody. And I tend to lean more towards where Blue Ribbon is on Alabama. In fact, I wonder if 13's low. I just look at the talent. I look at what Nate Oats has been able to do at Alabama and at Buffalo. I mean, this is not – you look at this and you say, okay, the talent they've got, this must be a coach who has trouble putting it all together. Okay, Alabama did underachieve a little bit last year, but for Nate Oats' teams, for the most part, that has definitely not been the case. He's one of the best coaches in college basketball, in my opinion, and I'm guessing in yours too. So, now having said what I'm about to say, I feel like we do this with every SEC team. We look at this, we go through the roster, we say, wow, that team is talented. And it's probably a little better than we thought going in. But I'm having trouble reconciling the discrepancies of opinion on Alabama and figuring out where the right place to pick Alabama might be in light of that.
Well, it's because you don't have a sample size of like this isn't Tennessee, right? Take Tennessee for example. How many of those guys are returning that have played a gazillion minutes together at this point? Ziegler, Vescovy, James, all those guys. Like they've played together. Like we know what we're going to get out of that, right? We don't know what we're
Yeah.
going to get out of this group because they haven't played together outside of summer stuff. I think Alabama had a trip overseas. you've got something from that, but like you don't have the same sort of data to go on, I guess. Again, if we want to take it back to the math example here, like you don't have that data to go off of with Alabama. You can see the individual numbers and the individual stats at different places, but you don't have that. Okay, when these guys were out there on the floor together, they were plus this and minus that. You don't have that with this team, and so I think that's probably one of the things going into the season. You may see a variety of opinions on them, but I just think that's the nature of the transfer portal now, and just kind of is the way it works. But again, you also have some teams like Tennessee and I mean even Kentucky, right? Like Kentucky's got
Yeah.
guys going. I mean, you got the National Player of the Year coming back. You got Severe Wheeler, your point guard. Like, this is a team that again is built completely different than it was last year. It's a new team in a certain sense. So I think that's why you could see a variety of opinions on Alabama. But at the same time, I mean, the upside is there. We know what they're capable of. You got a lot of guys who have proven themselves in other places. I think, some people may say, well, Namori Burnett's still unproven, but I don't know. I think, we knew coming in that he's a former 5-star guy. And I just think this was always the right fit for him versus Texas
Yeah.
Tech. To me, this just feels like had he chosen Alabama initially, obviously don't know if the injury happens and all that, but um, I just think this is the right fit for him. So, add Brandon Miller to the mix, Jaden Bradley, all those guys. I mean, it's just, yeah, there's clear upside, but I think that's why you may see difference of opinions is because there are some teams elsewhere, like a Kentucky, like a Tennessee, Arkansas, also kind of different in that they're flipping the roster, but yeah, I just think that's probably why Alabama falls where they are. So
I wonder how different Alabama's season is a year ago if Burnett is available to them at all. Like he missed the whole season with what was it, a knee injury, I think, and again, I think defense there that that would have maybe solved some issues for them. I mean, Burnett's a kid that averages a steal and a half a game in his time at Texas Tech, and that seemed to very much plug a hole, but he was never available.
yeah, and I mean you can't go to Texas Tech if you can't play defense, and I think that was certainly one of the appealing things of him. But I think physicality too is an important part of this, and I think the aggression is there with him, in terms of just kind of being in attack mode sometimes, and yeah, I think that I think there's something to the fact that certainly things could have been a bit different, but I don't know that team last year. I know Alabama fans are like, we don't even want to think about it anymore. But I just, there was a lot of frustration, and I think there was a lot of different reasons, as Nate Oats, as I said, has pointed out before, in terms of just the frustration he had. He's never one to hold back his thoughts, but I think this team could be different. It's just we got to see everything come together. I think before you know exactly what you're going to get from this team long term. So.
Blake, any parting thoughts on the Crimson Tide?
No, I mean everything we've said. I still think Alabama is the top 5 team in the SEC. I just don't know where you would place them right now. I think again, like I mentioned, I think Kentucky, Tennessee, Arkansas probably ahead of them for a lot of people right now. And I think the Kentucky Tennessee argument is just because there are proven commodities coming back that have played together. But I think Alabama can certainly get there. Certainly, getting Quinerly back will be a big part of their success. And I'm excited to see him back on the floor because I think some people just forget how good he was at times before he got injured, and how much a significant impact that probably had on that Notre Dame game. So yeah, I think clearly. We said last year they were very disappointing, but I'd be surprised if this team is to that. I feel like Nate Oats knew. He looked at last season. He said, "Boy, this did not work for us. These were things that we've got to figure out." And I feel like that was their focus going into this offseason. They go out and get the guys that they feel like are better fits for what they want to do. And yeah, I think they finish in the top 5 in the league. I think they're a preseason top 20 team. And it's just, again, can they be an SEC champion? I think it's just a matter of seeing how things come together with all these new pieces.
Okay, we either have previewed or will preview every single SEC team. We're getting near the halfway point of our previews as we do this. Best way to catch those is to subscribe to our channel So hit that subscribe button. We cover a ton of football, and we'll be doing a ton of baseball too at that time. So anyway, again, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of it. Thank you for watching. For Blake Lovell, I'm Chris Lee of Southeastern 14. We'll see you again very soon with another SEC basketball preview.